think a lot of people don't want to tell the truth when it comes to self-protection. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV. And every Monday I release videos on martial arts training and philosophy and technique and that kind of stuff. And so if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. Hopefully you like the video. But today let's go ahead and talk about self-protection and what I think that should look like if that's your focus. First and foremost, I think when you train, that context is one of the most important things that you should be paying attention to. Why are you training? And so I did a video not too long ago on that, so I'll link it up here so you can go check that out. If you haven't seen it, it's a great place to start so you kind of understand where I feel all of this stuff fits in. So now that we talked about context, the idea is we have to assume that for this conversation that the context is self-protection, not competition, not consensual violence, but acts of non-consensual violence. That distinction is really, really important to me. I think that that's a critical distinction. Because consensual violence is how we spar, even, from the most basic tournament style, that kind of stuff, all the way up to the UFC. The UFC's including a lot of very practical and very realistic levels of violence because of the rule set, which is really, really great. But there's still a level of consensual there, right? We both agreed to be in this ring. We both agreed. We might have even prepared by looking at the way each other fight so that we understand stuff about what to expect from this person so that we can try to win. Right? So we can try to get that purse. And that's awesome if that's what you're doing. But in self-protection, you don't get an opportunity to know what they want, what they're gonna do, what they're capable of, what their skill set already is. You might not get a chance to even choose the environment, the situation, any of it. So it's really important to know that there's a difference between consensual violence and non-consensual violence. So here it is. Here's what I think should be the main 4 things that are included in any self-protection curriculum. First, you gotta know how to stand up, you gotta know how to move around, and you gotta know how to strike from there. Second, you gotta know how to put someone on the ground because it's important to be able to control someone that way. Third, you've gotta know what to do when you're on the ground, whether you put someone there and you went to the ground with them or they put you there, or you even started there. You need to know what to do. And then fourth, it's gotta include some level of weapons, both improvised weapons as well as produced weapons, right? It's really important that you learn to deal with using them, leveraging those tools, and defending against them, working with somebody who brought the tools against you. But before we talk about that, I think the most important thing is that the material should be simple. That does not mean that it's easy. It just means that it should not be complicated. It should not be complex. Working in an adrenalized state, in a stressful state, working in situations where you're fearing for your life or you're worried about the people you're with, you can't rely on things that are greatly complex. And the higher the complexity, the more you need the other person to be doing the things you expect, which is not something that you can anticipate. You're not gonna have that. That's not how it's gonna work. It needs to be simple. It needs to be something that can be brought to bear regardless of the situation, regardless of the person or persons that are doing it, the environment, them behaving in a way that you expect, their mental state, their chemical state. Ideally, your base tool set, your main toolbox, includes things that are not specific so that they can be applied in any way. Ideally, the training is principle-based. It's important that it's not about a technique. It's not about a specific method of doing something. It's about understanding the principle that gets applied when you do it. That way, you can base what you're doing on the situation, the circumstance, and the person, and build off of that. The principle will apply. How you deliver the principle may be different. It might be something that you only ever do in that situation that one time, and you never do it again. And you might be a person who has a line of work or something that puts you in those situations repeatedly, and you may still never do it more than one time. And so that's okay. It needs to be okay because you need to not be latched on to how does this technique work. You're gonna use techniques to get there. You're going to be taught techniques as examples. I talked a little bit about this in the video where I talked about kata. You can check that out. I don't think that a martial art needs to have kata. I don't think that if you're looking at a martial art for self-protection, that it needs to not have kata. How you train is up to you, and someone who's applying it for the right reasons may choose to use kata or not use kata, and I don't think that is critical. I don't think that creates a situation where you're going to fail one way or the other. It's just the delivery method. So principles. You're going to learn technique. You're going to practice technique with repetition because without repetition, you can't learn how to apply it. It's got to be something you can apply. It's got to be something you can apply every time, or at least most of the time. Not everything works every time, but ideally you've worked it enough that regardless of the situation not being exactly to spec, you can still deploy it. But more importantly, you need to understand why it works, what things are being deployed to create that technique, what principles are being exploited, what physics are there that are making that happen. Are you toppling someone over? Are you striking someone? What are you doing? And understanding how you can generate that same principle, that same mechanic in a bunch of different ways. The better you understand why it works, the more you can deploy it any way that needs to be there for it to work. Your approach may vary based on the art of the style of system that you're using. A good friend of mine works in law enforcement and talked about how there's two ways to stop someone. One is you drain the fluids, and two is you turn off the computer. And that is very accurate. The third option is a level of control where you control that person to where they've agreed to stop. Sometimes you get that opportunity, sometimes you don't. So depending on the thing that you're doing, right? If you're taking firearms training, you're using blade-based training, things like that, weapon systems, then draining the fluids might be the direction that you're going. Training the computer may be secondary, right? You look at a firearm, there's ways to drain fluids, and then you can turn off that computer, but that's a smaller target moving a lot. It might not be an easy one for you to get to, so it's there, but maybe not as easy. You look at something like blade-based system, turning off that computer may be very difficult, but draining fluids may be available right from the very beginning. But maybe you're working a percussive system. In a percussive system, turning off the computer is more likely. You're less likely to be able to drain any fluids, especially of any volume that's going to make that person stop. So turning off the computer becomes your primary. So it just depends on the system, the approach, and what the situation looks like. But what's really important is understanding how this violence will be brought to you. Going back to that consensual, non-consensual. It's different when you're sparring with somebody and you're testing them out. You're moving in, you're moving out, you're moving in and striking and then getting back out of range. You're protecting yourself. You're testing what their range is like. That doesn't happen in real violence situations. In real violence situations, they really don't care what your range is, what range you like to work in, how you move, what kind of techniques you're going to try to use. They're going to come to you very fast, very sudden, possibly use some trick to get you to not be aware that they're about to do something, and then they're going to be overwhelming. They're going to create a situation where they don't care what things you have to do because they're doing their things. So your training should include the ability to both understand that, maybe manage that, but also be able to bring the same thing, be able to bring the same unstoppable nature that might be necessary. So let's look at those 4 methods, right? The 4 areas I think that you should work. So first, standing and moving, understanding how to set your weight, how to move around, how to have good footwork and be able to move is really important, because the best defense you will ever have is not being there. That could include just leaving. That could include getting out of range and making sure that what they're trying to do is not able to be deployed because of good footwork and good movement and good understanding of what their options are. But not being in that situation is really important. So movement. With movement comes learning 2 basic principles in my mind. 1, the ability to deliver power. Cue your striking. Your ability to strike and strike with power comes from your ability to move your whole body, but also your ability to control them. So my stance and my footwork and my weight management is entirely based on the ability to move and control you. If I get latched onto you in a way, can I throw you to the ground? Can I pin you? Can I hold you in a way that stops you from being able to do what you're trying to do? Can I control your limbs? Can I do these things? These are all part of movement from a standing environment that I think are really important. In that striking category, you need to have the ability to control an opponent's limbs. If they're trying to hit you, strike you, cut you, whatever it is, being able to control limbs is really important. Trying to manage and I'll just kind of dance around these things, that's a consensual violence thing. In non-consensual violence, the sooner you can control somebody's limbs, the better chance you're going to get of not getting hurt. So dancing out very far is not necessarily the best approach. If you can manage that, it can be safer for you. If you can stay further away and still deliver the things you need to deliver to get them to stop or to stop them, then that's great and ideal. If that's not an option, then hanging out in that middle territory is not good. You need to get in and you need to be in control of their limbs, controlling possibly the weapon that they have, and maybe working on shutting down that computer or draining fluids, whatever it is, right? So that's got to be part of it. How you move your body and that sort of thing is really critical. Therefore, I think that your movement and that kind of stuff and your striking needs to include limb control, needs to include clearing limbs so that you can hit, right? If you've got your hands up to stop me from hitting you, and that's what I need to do, then I need to be able to make that go away. I need to be able to clear that limb so that I can hit in whatever way is possible. I don't find kicking to be a very practical way to manage non-consensual violence. There are good things. I think my personal belief is any kick that delivers straight from the body, right? A straight kick, a side kick, a back kick, anything that allows me to direct energy directly into your center and keep you off of me is the ideal method of kicking for those situations. As you branch out from that into the round kicks and things like that, I believe lower success rate. Still very valid, and when they work really, really well. But when you go based off of numbers, how successful is this potentially going to be? You got to pay attention to that. Then third, as you get into a clinching situation, controlling limbs, generally you're too close to use your leg to its full potential. So that's where things like knees come in. Knees I find to be very valid, whereas kicks less deployable because of that closeness, that close quarter situation. And the more you're on one leg, delivering the other leg, the more likely that you're going to end up on the ground. Balance and the ability to manipulate weight comes first. The ability to strike and deliver power comes second. Next up is taking away the ability for them to strike you. Controlling limbs was category 1. Being able to do takedowns and throws is the next most important. You'll put someone on the ground in a way that you can continue to control them and take away their options. If they can't move and dance and go in any direction that they want to go because you've got them pinned to the floor, you've got more control options. Look at any law enforcement scenario when you've got somebody in that situation. One of the first things they're going to try to do is get that person on the ground so they can manage and control that person, use the planet to control that person. So you should train the same way. You should train with the same idea of how do I control somebody? How do I do that? In the case of multiple people, maybe you're putting someone on the ground so that you can have them have to deal with getting up from the ground while you deal with somebody else for a second. Because there is no fighting multiple people at once. There is rapid single tasking, but there's not good multitasking. It's just not a real thing. So possibly throwing in takedowns and stuff to be able to manipulate who you're dealing with and what your options are may be really important. The training should include falling and being able to take a throw, because it's the only way that you're ever going to get reps in learning how to throw and do takedowns is to learn how to fall and be thrown. Because you and your partner both need to be good at that so that you can deliver throws and takedowns to each other repeatedly until you get good at them. So that's really important. But then you need to be able to deal with being on the ground. What if when you threw them down, they latched onto you in a way that took you down? What if you lost your balance? What if something happened, you tripped, whatever? What if they did throw you to the ground? What if they jumped on top of you when you were in a situation where you were already on the ground? Women, I think it's really important to realize that women are attacked differently. There are situations where they're attacked like men, but it's more likely that they're going to have to deal with somebody who's going to try to control them, try to pin them to the ground. You enter into rape scenario and you've got people trying to be on top of you, right? And rape doesn't just happen suddenly. In some cases, it could even be a boyfriend or even a husband that started off, you were fine with it, you were good, they were on top of you, you were totally okay with it until you weren't. So knowing how to get someone off of you is critical and something I don't think gets looked at enough, especially in women's self-defense material. For women, you have to evaluate. Wherever you decide to train, you need to pay attention. Does the material and does the instructor cater to that environment? Do they understand what that looks like? Do they understand what violence against women looks like so that the training includes the appropriate things? If it doesn't, and that's your goal, you got to make a change, right? But you got to evaluate these things, because the last thing you want to do is be taught a certain method of dealing with things only to not be prepared for the things that could happen. As a guy in a martial training situation, I can tell you it is uncomfortable to have to look at someone and talk to them about rape, to have to put them in situations that feel like a rape situation to be able to create that. So a lot of places ignore it. And teach you how to you just won't go to the ground. You're just going to know how to, you're going to be a badass. You're going to know how to beat this person up before they would ever put you on the ground. And that's just not how it's going to go. It's dangerous to let that fear of discomfort of tackling these topics put you in a situation where you're not actually prepared for them. And so, yeah, it's uncomfortable and I don't like doing it, but I will continue to do it because it is important that it's included. It's a reality. It's something that's out there and it needs to be included. But guys too, I already said that putting someone on the ground to control them is a great tactic. well, we're not the only one who's going to use that tactic. Someone trying to do bad things to us will use it also. So knowing how to get somebody off of you, knowing how to manage and deliver power from there, knowing how to do that stuff is important. There are arts that are dedicated to that. But even if you're not training one of those, hopefully your art includes some of the basics, including just how do I stand up? How do I get someone off of me? And how do I stand up? Critical skills, critical. And then last, weapons. Hopefully in the first category of striking, the striking is taught in a way that transfers directly to the use of weapons. A lot of arts are going to work from the direction of empty-handed to weapons. But then you have things like the Filipino martial arts that start at weapons and work their way to empty hand. In a way, I really like that mechanic, and the reason is because when you work with a weapon, especially a longer weapon, then you work at a range where that thing is moving pretty fast and can deliver a lot of power, but because of the distance, things operate slower. You've got more time. So as you continue to train and the weapon gets shorter, things move a little faster. And as you work to short weapons, knives, things like that, things speed up again, you work to empty hands and things are going really fast. But by then you've developed skills that allow you to move very, very quickly and operate in that quick speed. But either approach is okay, as long as it includes both. Both pieces should be there. How to deliver attacks with a weapon, be it something improvised, be it something that you provided, something they provided you, etc., is important. And ideally, if you're training in a striking system that works with the right mechanics, then you're not having to learn two separate mechanics. You're not having to spend twice the amount of time, one half of that amount of time for empty hand striking and one half of that amount of time for weapon striking. Instead, both of them are combined with the same intent and work the same way. It's the difference between throwing a punch, which is an okay mechanic for hitting, and throwing a hammer fist. Because a hammer fist does not change when you put a weapon in the hand, be it a knife back here or something to slash, be it a pen, be it whatever it is, even swinging a bat or something like that, same mechanic. So things like that, not only is it a little bit safer for your hand to hit that way, you also have the ability to immediately translate to weapons without much thought. I think that's really critical, but each approach is going to be different. But weapons training shouldn't stop there, because weapons training should include what to do if they have a weapon, right? And it should not be complicated. It should not be something that puts you in more danger dealing with it. It comes back to controlling the limb and turning off the computer. That's what's important. So that's the approach that should be taken when dealing with weapons. Weapons can move very fast, and heaven forbid you actually get hit with that weapon the first couple times because it was produced before you recognize what was going on. So you're not going to have this perfect situation where they come to you with this nice clean attack and then pause while you figure out what to do and hit them 7 times. Instead, it needs to be about controlling it. It comes back to, can I work with somebody who can deliver it in a way that allows me to work the technique directly? Then can I work with somebody who provides some resistance or some additional energy to make me have to make sure I do it right? Then can I work with somebody who's going to actively try to not let me have that happen so that I know that I can do it even in a situation where I'm not in control? And then can I train it in a way that allows me to work in a live sparring method that includes that unpredictability but still allows me to deploy the same types of techniques? One issue that I have and have had even in my own training is the idea of having certain methods of training that are really good for handling the idea of violence in a self-protection environment. But then as soon as you start sparring, it becomes consensual violence again. And then the sparring is not conducive to actually practicing that material. It needs to not be that way. It shouldn't be duplicitous. It should be conducive, and they should work as parts of a whole. So the live training, the sparring, the random, the unpredictable needs to allow for deploying the base skills, period. Time spent on other stuff is time not spent on this thing, right? Comes back to that context. What do I hope to gain? And since time is my only commodity, the only thing I truly have to work with, how do I spend it wisely? So that's it. Those are the things that I think are really important, and it breaks down into those 4. So in summary, you've got standing, moving, and striking. You've got putting someone on the ground. You've got dealing with when you are on the ground and dealing with weapons. The weapons part should apply to all 3 above it, including dealing with being on the ground. So that's it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that I left something out? Do you think there's more to it? Do you think that I overcomplicated it? Let me know in the comments and let's talk about it. I want to hear what people think, because I think self-protection is something really important that we need to spend time looking at and truly, I think a lot of martial arts have spent a lot of time working away from the appropriate focus when it comes to self-protection, but then they sell it as self-protection and people are set up for failure, which is terrible, because if you're taught in a way that sets you up for failure when it comes to self-protection, you might not get a chance to ever tell somebody that it didn't work. And I don't think that the instructors that are doing that intentionally. I think there are some that don't care, that are just pumping out material that allows them to continue to make checks. And that's something. I don't like it. But I think some truly think that that's what they're doing. They're preparing people. But they've never been in situations of violence themselves. And because of that, they don't actually realize that they're not preparing people correctly. I don't think you have to be in situations of violence to get there. I haven't been in any major situations of violence personally. I don't think that makes me any less of a good teacher, because instead I spend a lot of time talking to people who do have to deal with that, who can provide me the information of what is this like, who can add elements of realism to the training so that we can understand it and make sure it's deployed correctly. And over time, I've trained with people who do deal with those violent situations, and the stuff that I'm teaching checks out. They understand it and they confirm for me that, yeah, this works, this fits, and that is important. That's critical, and it's the only way that I can do it without being in those violent situations. But I think there's plenty of people who just trust. They trust. They were told that this would work. This manages the situation. They were trained in a way that made it feel successful, and they never cared to investigate it. Without that, they never realized. So I don't fault them for that. I hope that one day they figure it out. You know, I personally lose sleep thinking that something I'm training might get somebody hurt because it didn't work, because it wasn't appropriate. I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't ever want that to be the case. So instead, I spend a lot of time investigating and researching and trying to understand and testing and training and testing. It's important. So that said, if you've been in situations and you've been through violent things and you think that where I'm at is off base, don't hold back. Tell me that, because that's the only way I'm ever going to get better. It's the only way I'm ever going to be able to manage the expectation of this stuff. But in the meantime, that's it for right now. If you like this video, smash that like button. If you like videos like this, hit that subscribe. If you want to know when new videos are coming out, hit that bell. And in the meantime, I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.